federal law attaches grave criminal penalties, serious consequences for anyone who is not a citizen who votes in a federal election. Interestingly enough, neither the Constitution or any federal law, of course, dictates what any state might do with regard to state and local elections and who may vote in those. It's interesting that a small handful of states have allowed non-citizens to vote, typically in local elections. Never quite understood why some might think that's a good idea. That's nonetheless their prerogative, as these are states and political subdivisions of states making those decisions. But in the federal government, that is not the case, and it should never be the case. But once in those jurisdictions, they've got people who are registering to vote in those particular elections, again, typically local elections as non-citizens, it raises all kinds of questions. Once they have registered, what happens to their registration? Is there a mechanism in those jurisdictions whereby those who are allowed to vote in whatever local election are prevented somehow from using the same voter registration file to also cast votes in a federal election? The states that allow this, that are doing that, are conspicuously among the states not participating in memoranda of understanding-based agreements with authorities in the Department of Homeland Security and other federal agencies involved in this, meaning they're not sharing their information, not opening their files to allow for federal authorities to examine them and make sure that those people are being kept separate from the list of voters allowed to cast votes in federal elections. So the Save America Act would repair our election security by requiring proof of citizenship to register and a photo ID to vote. This is an important part of ensuring our longstanding promise of one citizen, one vote. When you allow non-citizens to vote, that offsets that equation. It dilutes, it diminishes the votes cast by American citizens lawfully. Now, our Democrat colleagues have been insisting that this is not necessary. They insist it's not necessary because, after all, it's already illegal for a non-citizen to vote in a federal election. But that's a little bit like saying it's unnecessary to require liquor stores to check IDs to make sure that they don't sell liquor to children because, after all, it's already illegal. There are lots of circumstances where it makes sense to do that sort of thing, trust but verify, because if you don't do that, you're not even going to know who might be violating it. This is one of those areas. Now, today, one of our colleagues from Oregon, Senator Jeff Merkley, said that the Save America Act, and this is a direct quote, stabs a knife through the beating heart of our democracy. Really? Well, that's news to me. First of all, it's news to me that given that a policy choice that enjoys the support of roughly 80% of the American people, putting that in law, I don't understand how that would stab democracy in the heart, especially given that this is itself strengthening and securing one of the most important incidents of citizenship, which is the vote. Republicans overwhelmingly support this. 95% of Republicans, roughly 83% of Americans generally, and 71% of Democrats. It's only here in Washington, D.C., within the halls of the United States Capitol, that this is controversial, even among Democrats. Over 170 countries across the world have some form of voter ID requirement. It's actually much easier to identify the very small handful of nations with democratic elections that do not have voter ID requirements. So I would ask the question, why should we allow the United States of America to have election security laws and procedures inferior to those in, I don't know, Moldova or Bangladesh, for example? The Save America Act embodies the mantra often used in this town and elsewhere that we want to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. You have to have both of those. If you neglect either one, you're going to create problems. If you prefer the former, well, shunning the latter You will, in fact, succeed in making it easy to vote. But that sort of betrays and diminishes the whole point of having free and fair elections, and it makes them impossible. So, look, I think that there's only one legitimate reason to oppose this. I have yet to hear a legitimate argument against the bill, and which begs the question, do they really just want to make it easy to vote so badly that they're willing or even enthusiastic to just make it easier to cheat? So far, the congressional Democrats have, by and large, focused on arguments that are a combination of being ill-founded, relying on blatant mischaracterizations of the statutory text itself, including and especially the text beginning on page 12, line 22, and following on to the following page, easing the documentary requirements for proof of citizenship, making it so easy that it's much easier than filling out your I-9 form when you start a new job with a new employer, where you're required to prove your citizenship if, in fact, you're an American. If you're not an American citizen, you're going to have to produce a visa showing that you are eligible to work. But we make it easier than that. We make it so easy, in fact, that even if all of your citizenship documentation papers have disappeared because your house burned down, your dog ate them, your crazy Aunt Madge came and stole them and took them to the dump for some inexplicable reason, or maybe you never had them, you can still go to a state election official, swear out an affidavit just describing the basic elements, the basic factual assertions behind your claim to citizenship, whether it's when and where you were born and to whom. If you are a natural-born citizen, entitled to citizenship by virtue of the circumstances at your birth, or if you're a naturalized citizen, where, when, and how you became a naturalized citizen, and the date, exact or approximate, of your naturalization. This makes it incredibly easy and puts the onus back on the state if you're one of those people who either lacks some documentation or maybe even lacks all of it. They ignore that. And then a lot of the rest of their documents boil down to a combination of things. It's racist and it's sexist. Does any of that sound familiar? You've heard that before. Very often when it does come up, it comes up in a context like this one, where both of those arguments are red herrings. Both of those arguments are rooted in assumptions that are themselves racist and misogynistic, and they're cover for something else. Why are they arguing that when it so obviously does not apply? It's impossible to reconcile with the text of the bill itself to make that accusation. What are they covering for? What's missing when that's the argument that they continue to fall back to like a dog to its vomit? I can't think of anything more racist or misogynistic than those arguments that are being raised, at least not within this realm. You can think of things, but it's hard to come up with anything more racist or misogynistic than the assumptions underlying those arguments. So look, showing ID and proof of citizenship is something that Americans have to do every single day to get a job, to start a job, to board a plane, to open a bank account, to enroll in school, to shovel snow in New York City, to get veterans benefits, to get Social Security benefits, to get a hunting license or a fishing license or pick up a prescription, or to get into the Democratic National Convention, where you have to prove identity with a voter ID, and you have to, in order to be able to participate in the proceedings, show that you're entitled to be there and that you're a delegate. Yes, they do that. So if they want to call this Jim Crow 2.0, then so too is the Democratic Party. And of course, it is not, nor is this. These are red herring arguments.